John Deere has confirmed it in its own written statements that the mid-frame skid steer loaders and compact track loaders built at Dubuque Works are being moved to a new plant in Ramos Arizpe, Mexico, that the ramp down in Dubuque started early this year, and that the whole transition is supposed to be finished by the end of this year. That's not a rumor somebody handed me in a parts line. That's the company's own language, given to Iowa reporters, on the record. Drive into Dubuque today, and the plant is still standing, still running, still the largest employer in that town, with more than 2,800 people inside it. But Deere itself said that roughly 200 production employees and 25 salaried employees at that plant support the machines that are leaving. Deere said that number, not me, and yesterday the company reported its third quarter. Net income of $1.379 billion, $5.10 a share, up from $4.75 a year ago. And here's the part that made me set my coffee down. The segment that carried the entire quarter was construction and forestry, with operating margin jumping to 12.1% from 7.7%. Construction and forestry, that is the exact business whose skid steer line is being packed up and driven south. So why would a company move the work that's currently making it money? I spent 9 years on the line at a Deere plant before I came back to farm this ground full-time, fourth generation on it. That's all I'll say about that. Here's what happened, in order, because the order matters more than any single announcement. In 2022, Deere said tractor cab and welding work was going from Waterloo to Ramos Arizpe. Reporting at the time put the Waterloo impact at around 250 jobs. A month later, Ottumwa, mower conditioner production, out of Ottumwa Works, headed to Deere's existing hay and forage mower factory in Monterey, 1,100 miles away. The company said it didn't know yet how many people that would hit. Workers on that floor told local TV they'd been building mower conditioners there for generations. Then, June of 2024, Dubuque. Skid steers and compact track loaders, going to Ramos. Same month, more than 120 production workers at Seating and Cylinder in Moline went on indefinite layoff. Weeks later, about 610 more across 3 plants, 280 at East Moline, 230 at Davenport, about 100 at Dubuque, all effective the end of August. Add up the year. Investigate Midwest counted 2,167 Deere workers laid off in 2024 across Waterloo, Davenport, Dubuque, Ankeny, Johnston, Urbandale, Ottumwa, Moline, and East Moline. The same outlet counted more than 4,500 jobs cut since 2015. The cuts kept coming through 2025. Harvester Works, the Waterloo Foundry, Des Moines. Now hold that against the other column. Deere posted more than $10 billion in profit in 2023. $5 billion in net income in fiscal 2025. The company's chief executive, John May, took home $27.9 million for that same fiscal year, up slightly from the year before. Shareholders got a quarterly dividend of $1.62 a share, and in November of 2024, Deere confirmed a $55 million plant in Nuevo Leon, Mexico, for mini track loaders and mini wheel loaders. The company's regional manager for Mexico said flatly that the project was going forward regardless of what happened politically in the United States. Regardless. That's the word that stuck with me. And look at the shape of the whole company while you're here. Deere employs somewhere around 73,000 people worldwide. Roughly 30,000 of them are in the United States, less than half. For a company founded in Moline in 1837, whose name is on half the machines in every field between here and Des Moines, that ratio tells you something the marketing never will. Which half do you think grows next? Subscribe right now if you want this told straight by somebody who's actually stood on that floor and actually signs the check for the equipment, because this channel only keeps running if enough of you decide it should. Stay with me too, because what Deere does in Dubuque between now and December is the part almost nobody is watching. So let's get to why. The official answer is in the statement. Deere said the Dubuque decision reflected evolving its business model, addressing rising manufacturing costs, improving operational efficiencies, and taking advantage of locations in the United States and globally with a growing labor force. Read that last phrase again, a growing labor force. When I was on the line, that phrase came down to us as a labor problem, meaning hours, meaning Iowa couldn't staff the shifts. And there's something to that. Iowa's labor participation still hasn't come back to where it sat before 2020. A labor economist at Iowa State said as much when the Waterloo cab decision came down. But a tight labor market and a cheaper labor market aren't the same problem, and they don't get the same solution. One of them you fix with wages, the other one you fix with a map. Here's the question I'd want answered under oath. If this is about finding workers, why does the fix always point the same direction? I'll tell you what a decision like this actually looks like from the floor, because it doesn't look like an announcement. It looks like the schedule board. Overtime disappears first. Then a shift gets consolidated. Then the tooling in one bay sits idle a week longer than it should, and a guy who's been there 22 years walks past it every morning and does the arithmetic himself. By the time anybody from corporate stands up in front of you, the people in that room have known for months. What they haven't known is where the work is going. That's the only part the meeting adds. And there's a second reason, one that never shows up in a press release. Mexico is a customer now. Deere's own numbers say Mexico is the second largest consumer of its construction equipment in Latin America, up 76% since 2022. Building where you sell is not a scandal. It's ordinary industrial logic. But when the thing you build there used to be built in Dubuque, ordinary industrial logic lands on a specific family's kitchen table. Now here's where I come at this from the other side, the side I live on now. I don't just used to build this equipment. I buy it. I finance it. I sit across a desk from a dealer and sign for a machine that costs more than my grandfather's entire farm did. Deere added assembly lines in Waterloo for the 9RX, and I've stood in a lot looking at one of those, doing the math in my head on what that payment does to a corn year at these prices. Corn was down 37% from 2022 by the time Deere was explaining its layoffs. Soybeans down 24%. Wheat down 35%. That's the company's own cited context for why demand fell. So think about what that means. The farm economy goes soft, farmers stop buying, Deere cuts the workers who build for farmers, and simultaneously moves lines to a market that's growing. Every one of those steps makes sense on a spreadsheet. Together, they describe a company quietly rebalancing away from the people it was built around. Does anybody in Moline think a farmer in Jones County doesn't notice that? Because we do notice. I've had the conversation at the co-op more times than I can count now, and it always ends the same way. Somebody says, "Well, what else am I going to buy?" And that's the honest answer, and it's also the whole problem. When the equipment, the software, the parts, and the repair authorization all run through one company, being angry at that company is an emotion, not an option. Then, in September of 2024, Donald Trump threatened a 200% tariff on Deere equipment made in Mexico and sold here. First time an agricultural equipment maker got named like that. Deere kept building. The Nuevo Leon plant is still slated to start this year. Now the honest part, because you deserve the version that survives somebody who actually knows this business. First, most of these layoffs were not caused by Mexico. Deere has said repeatedly the job cuts came from a weakened farm economy and lower demand, and the crop price numbers back that up. If the Ramos plant had never been drawn on a napkin, Dubuque and Waterloo and East Moline would still have been cut because we stopped buying. Second, this is one product line, not the plant. Dubuque Works keeps building large frame skid steers and compact track loaders, backhoes, crawler dozers, crawler loaders, and knuckle boom loaders. Nobody is closing Dubuque. Anybody telling you otherwise is selling you outrage. Third, Deere is genuinely spending money here. In May of 2025, the company committed $20 billion to United States operations over 10 years, on top of $2.5 billion in domestic factories since 2019. 60 facilities across more than 16 states, a new excavator factory in North Carolina. The company says roughly 80% of what it sells here is made here. And fourth, laid-off workers weren't turned out with nothing. Supplemental unemployment pay covering about 95% of weekly net pay for up to 26 weeks, and health coverage for at least 6 months. That's better than most of American manufacturing offers. It is not the same thing as a job, but it isn't nothing, and pretending otherwise makes everything else I've said easier to dismiss. So, what's actually true? What's true is that a company can invest $20 billion in America and still move your specific line to Coahuila, and both of those sentences can appear in the same annual report without either one being a lie. That's not hypocrisy. That's how a global manufacturer works. The trouble is that the $20 billion gets announced on an earnings call, and the 225 jobs get announced in a conference room, and only one of those rooms had anybody in it who'd be affected. Drive into Dubuque again in January, after the transition is finished. The plant will still be standing. The sign will still say the same thing. And somewhere on that floor, there will be an empty rectangle on the concrete, cleaner than everything around it, where a line used to be. I've seen that outline before, from the inside. It doesn't get filled back in by a press release.